the invitation? And then even more so, why would he accept the invitation and go to the Vatican in the middle of the campaign? Unless the Vatican believed that Bernie had an honest-to-God chance of winning the nomination. I mean, a lot of us wanted to believe he had a chance of winning the nomination, but there was no way Hillary Clinton and her cronies at the DNC were going to let that happen. But I wonder if it's something so simple. They thought, he might win this thing, so we ought to do the right thing and invite him out here. I think I'm going to go with that until I see evidence that it was something a little more nefarious. Chow Tefu 9856 asks, why trust Eric Prince? I have my own reasons, but what are yours? Seriously, right? When I was at the CIA, working as an operations officer in the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, Eric Prince was somebody who came up all the time, like daily. The reason why I don't trust Eric Prince is that he made himself a billionaire by promoting war. If there's peace, he doesn't make any money. And so he wants there to be constant conflict. Yeah, I complain a lot on podcasts here in the United States that the American economy has transitioned into a full-time, wartime economy. If we stopped fighting, the economy would collapse. We would go into a recession. It's not an accident that the highest number of millionaires per capita used to be in Silicon Valley, but post 9/11 is now in Washington, D.C. A lot of people got rich because of terrorism and war. Eric Prince became a billionaire because of terrorism and war. And I don't trust him because I don't think it's in American national interest to constantly be at war. I think that's a mistake. Plus, if he's such a patriotic American, why does he live in Dubai? Why doesn't he come back here and pay his taxes? That's another thing that bothers me. Skeeters R4K says, what is your opinion of Trump pick Joe Kent to head the National Counterterrorism Center? Bad, bad, bad. Joe Kent is a January 6th denier. I personally believe that people were prosecuted for January 6th who should not have been prosecuted. I think rather than, 1,200 people being prosecuted, it should have been more like a dozen. A lot of these cases, many of these cases were thrown out and Donald Trump pardoned everybody else. But Joe Kent denies that January 6th was anything more than, a picnic where people got loud. He doesn't know anything about Counterterrorism Center. I will say this, though. What's going to save us here is the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, that he's going to be the chief of, is a joke. What it is, it's not CTC, the Counterterrorism Center, which is at the CIA. It is the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, which is out in the Virginia countryside. It is an analytic group made up of all of the agencies that make up the American intelligence community. So it's a bunch of nerds, I used to be one of them, who sit in their cubicles and think the big thoughts. At least they can't do any damage. So there's that. Doc of the World says, huge respect and appreciation. Thank you very much, sir. Can you make an episode about the situation in Syria? I am Syrian and I firmly believe that the new president of Syria is a CIA asset. Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. He goes on to say, in fact, I have a theory that he was recruited during his time in Iraqi prisons under the management of the U.S. Army there. Also true. The U.S. Army did manage the American prison system in Iraq. The fact that President Trump speaks about him with such neutral or even supportive language compels me to think that he's definitely on the books as an asset for the agency. Do you think that my hypothesis is crazy or far-fetched? I do not. I think there's wisdom in your theory. Now, of course, we're never going to know. We probably will never know if he is a recruited and paid asset of the CIA. But my God, this all looks so friendly and so chummy and so perfect, right? This guy came out of nowhere, used to be ISIS, used to be Al-Qaeda, and the U.S. says, oh no, we like this guy. We're going to take this guy. And and by the way, we're going to lift all sanctions immediately. Come on. It's not how the world really works. So why did it work like that here? He goes on to say, one of the things I read about him is that when there's a typo, it's ISIL or ISIS operatives went to meet with him, they would later disappear or get blown up by drones. This compels me to think that he must have been passing their names and locations. I'm extremely happy if this is a fact because it's about time that Syria works with the United States and moves away from Russia and China and the like. I really appreciate it if you can make an episode to shed light on what you think is happening and the Ashara Sudden conversion to Western ideology. That is a great idea. And you know what? Yes, we'll do that. We'll do an episode on Syria. I have a lot of friends here in Washington who are experts on Syria. I've been to Syria many times. I have to say, it is one of the most beautiful, historic places on the planet. The things that you see in Damascus are mentioned in the Bible. It's an incredible place. But I will go on the record at this early stage and say, I think that you are right, Doc of the World. I think there's some kind of connection with CIA that is not public. I think you're onto something. Peter Boy Rax, R-A-K-S, says, John, why haven't we abolished the CIA by now for all its colluding with the power elite billionaire class against we the people? Amen. Right? Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York, wrote a book exactly about this, saying we should abolish the CIA. President John Kennedy said 4 weeks before he was assassinated that he wanted to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. In an op-ed in 1968, President Harry Truman said in the Washington Post that the gravest mistake he ever made was not dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan, it was creating the CIA. And in his final speech as president, President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us that the CIA and the military-industrial complex were going to bring down our country. We haven't abolished the CIA because the CIA is now so popular on Capitol Hill. It is so powerful. It is so intertwined with everything that we do as a government that it would be virtually impossible to do away with. We should do away with it. And besides the fact that we should do that on moral grounds. Its work is duplicative. State Department does analysis in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. The Defense Department does source recruitment in Defense Human Services. DARPA and NSA do science and technology development and signals intelligence, just like the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. We just don't need a CIA, but I'm afraid it's here to stay. Jim Billy Ray Bob says the system is going to collapse no matter what is done. The elites all seem to believe our current system and pseudo-democracy has run its course. The only question then is what comes afterward? What new system and who's in charge? I don't even know what to say to that. I think you're correct, Jim Billy Ray Bob. I fear what comes next. Thomas Jefferson once said that every so often the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of martyrs. Those are very strong words. But I wonder if we're heading in that direction for the first time in 80 years? 160 years. I wonder if that's the road we're going down. You're right, we do have a pseudo-democracy. The current system is broken. Other democratic countries make fun of us for the system that we have. It just simply doesn't work. And who's in charge? It's going to be anybody's guess. LJ1066 says, yay, I'm so glad you have a channel on YouTube now. Thank you for that. Never a dull moment with Kiriakou. Thank you for that also. Wish I could monetize it. Is your show going to discuss what is going on with Xi Jinping? I would love to know your perspective on what him being missing for weeks means. I talked about this on a previous episode, recently, like in the last couple of weeks. Xi Jinping, the premier of China, is missing, at least by my definition of the word. He hasn't been seen in public in weeks. But I answered this question on this earlier episode by telling a story. My first station chief in the Middle East had joined the CIA from the State Department, where he was a security officer in the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. And in 1976, he went with Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, to China to see Mao Zedong. As soon as Henry got off the plane, my boss said, he told the Chinese, I need to see Mao, I need to see Mao, I need to see Mao. At every opportunity, I need to see Mao. And the Chinese kept saying, you'll see Mao. He's not ready to see you yet, but you'll see him. Well, they went through 3 days of silliness. You know, they went to a museum, they got a tour of, this palace and Tiananmen Square, and at every opportunity, Kissinger kept saying, I need to see Mao, I need to see Mao. Finally, a couple of hours before they were scheduled to leave, the Chinese told Kissinger, Mao is ready to see you. They escort Kissinger and my friend into this room that had a drapery that ran the entire length of the wall. There was nothing else in the room. He said they opened the drape, and there's Mao, and he's laying in a bed, and he's obviously dead. And the Chinese said that Mao is sleeping, but Mao wanted them to know that he's aware of the visit, and he's sorry he can't talk because he's sleeping. My friend whispered to Kissinger, he's dead. And Kissinger whispered back, don't tell anybody. So they flew back to Washington. Kissinger immediately went to President Ford and said, Mao is dead. We saw his dead body laying in a bed. It was another 3 weeks before the Chinese finally came out and said, Mao died. He just died a minute ago, but we're going to celebrate the life of Mao. The Chinese usually need a little bit of time to get their act together when there's a major leadership change. Now, I don't know if Xi Jinping is dead. I don't have any idea. But this story leads me to believe that something's wrong. Did he have a heart attack? Did he have a stroke? Did he fall out of favor? Is he being deposed? We don't know, but I agree with you. Something is up. Question from KS111-X3R. I would like you to do a show on what you think is wrong with the Democratic Party. Amen. We need a whole show because there's a lot wrong with the Democratic Party. I was a third-generation Democrat, and I left the Democratic Party in 2012. And every single day since then, I think, oh my God, did I do the right thing? The Democratic Party has become the party of war. It's become the party of the Pentagon. It's become the party of support for Zionist expansionism. It's the party that ignores human rights. Listen, when I find myself agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene on the situation in Gaza, and I come to consider Tucker Carlson a friend, the whole political system's turned on its head. And unless the Democratic Party gets back to being Democrats, I just don't see success for them in the near or medium-term future. Let's do a show about that. So I want to close by saying this. You guys have been very kind to me. So I want to thank you very much. We've only been doing this a couple of months. We're coming up on 50,000 subscribers. That is incredible, and it's beyond my wildest dreams. So please help us to continue.